During a recent family vacation to an opulent retreat, my daughter-in-law publicly shamed me in the main hall. We subsequently canceled the elderly woman's accommodation. She truly deserves to be relegated to sleeping in a refuse container. Laughter erupted from those around me. I calmly proceeded to the front desk and presented a platinum card. Upon recognition by the general manager, everyone's faces drained of color. "It is a distinct pleasure to welcome you, Mrs. Thornton. Please follow my account to its conclusion and reveal the city from which you are currently accessing this narrative, enabling me to gauge the extent of its dissemination." I was 61 years of age, and I had never contemplated that the most mortifying juncture of my existence would unfold amidst a throng of strangers within the resplendent foyer of a high-end establishment. We had been traveling by automobile for approximately 4 hours. My son, David Thornton, was at the helm, with his wife, Fiona, occupying the passenger seat. I was relegated to the cramped confines of the rear, sandwiched between my 2 grandchildren. This excursion had been a source of anticipation for me for many months, indeed, for an extended period. From the moment David casually mentioned during a telephone conversation that their destination for spring break was Crestview Lodge, a flicker of hope ignited within my chest. A hope I should have immediately extinguished. Fiona had stated that there was space for me. More precisely, her utterance was, "I suppose your mother may accompany us if she is truly set on it." The inflections in her voice, which I knew all too well, transformed every cordial invitation into a reluctant concession, every perceived gesture of kindness into a favor I did not merit. Nevertheless, I assented. Naturally, I agreed. Throughout the journey, Fiona lamented the congestion, the oppressive heat, and the radio station David had selected. When one of the children inquired if a restroom stop was possible, she emitted a sigh as if burdened with an insurmountable task. "Merely 30 more minutes," she declared, with a palpable irritation. David remained silent, a characteristic he consistently displayed. I averted my gaze to the window, attempting to cultivate a sense of excitement, striving to persuade myself that this occasion would somehow be different, that perhaps, just perhaps, we might approximate the semblance of a genuine family for a brief interval. Crestview Lodge materialized before us, resembling a scene plucked from a high-gloss periodical. Pristine white stone facades, meticulously maintained gardens, and an imposing fountain adorning the primary entryway. The parking area was occupied by an array of luxury vehicles, including Mercedes, BMWs, and several Teslas. David maneuvered our unpretentious sedan into a space amongst them, and for a fleeting instant, I experienced a sense of belonging, of being an integral part of something extraordinary. We entered the lobby, and the cool blast of the air conditioning offered an immediate respite from the stifling heat of the car. The interior was even more magnificent than the exterior suggested. Soaring ceilings, dazzling crystal chandeliers, and marble floors so impeccably polished they mirrored our reflections. Elegant families were forming orderly queues at the check-in counter. Staff members moved with discreet efficiency, and the gentle hum of conversations mingled with the subtle strains of instrumental music. I lingered at the rear as David and Fiona approached the desk. The children, meanwhile, darted towards an ornamental fountain situated near the waiting area. I clutched my compact rolling suitcase, suddenly feeling incongruous in my simple floral dress and comfortable walking shoes. Fiona addressed the young woman at the reception, her dark hair artfully secured in a neat bun. I observed her cursorily check something on the computer. I witnessed Fiona nod, and David sign some documents. Everything appeared to be proceeding smoothly, mundanely, as expected. Then, Fiona turned her attention to me. A distinct glint in her eyes immediately alerted me. It was the same expression she exhibited just before uttering one of her seemingly innocuous remarks, comments that, while presented as jests, inflicted wounds that lingered for days. She approached me with measured steps, the sharp click of her heels echoing loudly on the marble floor. The lobby teemed with people, families awaiting their turn, staff members transporting luggage, and guests comfortably settled on plush leather sofas. And then Fiona's voice escalated. She did not shout, but her volume was sufficient to draw the attention of everyone present. "We have canceled your reservation, Brenda." I was momentarily paralyzed. The words initially failed to register. I anticipated David would interject to correct her, to explain that a misunderstanding had occurred, but he merely stared at the floor, his hands clasped in his pockets. Fiona continued, her voice gaining in volume and clarity. "We are not going to expend funds on a room for you. You can sleep in the refuse bin. That is your just desserts, after all." Laughter. I distinctly heard laughter. Not from everyone, but from a select few. An older gentleman clad in a cashmere sweater emitted a stifled chuckle. A younger woman whispered something to her companion, and they both smirked. Even the receptionist appeared uncomfortable, her gaze directed downwards as if enduring such spectacles was an inherent part of her professional duties. And my son, my sole offspring, the child I nurtured, the one I fed, the one I comforted during his childhood nightmares, he laughed. It was not a boisterous guffaw, but rather a nervous, subdued sound. Yet I heard it, and that quiet amusement was more devastating than any torrent of mockery. The children blessedly remained oblivious to the unfolding drama. My 9-year-old grandson, Jake, looked at me with bewilderment. "Grandma, is she going to sleep with us?" Fiona abruptly tugged his arm. "Quiet, sweetie. The adults are conversing." A wave of heat surged through me, starting in my chest and ascending to my neck and cheeks. It was more than mere shame. It was a profound confluence of humiliation, betrayal, and an agony so acute it rendered me breathless. The incandescent light from the chandelier seemed excessively bright. The gentle murmur of conversations faded into a distant cacophony. My legs trembled uncontrollably. For a fleeting second, I contemplated turning on my heel and departing, simply vanishing, summoning a taxi, and making my way back to the bus station, erasing myself from their lives as they so clearly desired. However, in that precise instant, something within me underwent a subtle transformation. It was not anger, not yet. It was a piercing clarity. For years, I had endured Fiona's barbs, her petty cruelties, her convenient lapses in memory when it came to extending invitations to family gatherings, the Christmases when there was insufficient space in the vehicle to collect me, the children's birthday celebrations for which the invitation arrived a day after the event had concluded, and my son, my David, who consistently remained silent, never once defending me. He always concocted an excuse, a justification, a rationale to diminish the severity of his wife's actions. And I permitted it because they constituted my family, because I abhorred conflict, and because I lived in constant fear of their complete estrangement. But in that moment, standing amidst the opulence of that grand lobby with onlookers regarding me with either pity or amusement, a realization dawned. I had, in truth, lost them a considerable time ago. I inhaled deeply, my hands ceasing their involuntary tremor. I adjusted the handle of my suitcase and proceeded towards the reception desk. I deliberately avoided any eye contact with Fiona or David. I walked with my posture erect, my steps assured, even as I felt an internal sense of profound disintegration. The receptionist observed me with an expression of cautious apprehension. "Ma'am, may I be of assistance?" From my handbag, I produced a card. It was not an ordinary credit card. It possessed a discernible weight and a particular sheen under the lobby's illumination. I placed it upon the marble counter without uttering a word. The receptionist retrieved it, her eyes widening discernibly. She examined the card, then my face, and finally returned her gaze to the card. Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she swiped it through the reader. "Mrs. Thornton," she whispered, her countenance paling considerably. We were unaware of your impending arrival. Forgive me, we had no prior notification of your reservation." A palpable silence descended behind me, so profound I could feel the weight of the unspoken observations pressing against my back. The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard with nervous rapidity. "One moment, please. I shall contact the general manager immediately." And then he appeared. A gentleman attired in an immaculate suit, his gray hair impeccably styled, approaching swiftly from a private office. His expression transitioned from professional courtesy to one of almost profound reverence the instant his eyes met mine. "Mrs. Thornton?" His voice resonated throughout the lobby. He hastened towards me. "We had no anticipation of your gracious presence. Your name is listed among the resort's proprietors." The world, it seemed, momentarily ceased its motion. Proprietors. I heard a choked gasp from behind me, and I knew precisely who had uttered it. The manager, identified as Robert, continued speaking. But my focus wavered. He spoke of the presidential suite, of bespoke arrangements, and of the entire staff being at my disposal. My heart pounded, not from apprehension, but from a curious amalgamation of relief and profound sadness. I turned around slowly. David was deathly pale, his complexion entirely drained of color. His mouth moved, opening and closing as if struggling to articulate words that remained lodged in his throat. Fiona, conversely, presented a visage frozen in an expression of unadulterated astonishment. Her normally calculating green eyes now reflected a sentiment I had never before witnessed in her: fear. The children tugged at their father's sleeve, posing questions he was incapable of answering. The individuals who had so recently indulged in laughter now observed our tableau with awkward curiosity. Some exchanged murmurs amongst themselves, others merely stared, anticipating the next development. "Mrs. Thornton," Robert gently touched my arm, "shall we escort your luggage to your suite without delay? We have champagne meticulously chilled, and our chef is prepared and to prepare any culinary desire you may have for your evening repast." I inclined my head in silent assent, my voice still not fully under my command. "And your companions?" he added, his gaze shifting to David and Fiona with a neutral, professional demeanor, yet a subtle recognition flickered in his eyes. He had, undoubtedly, witnessed the entire scene unfold. They have their own arrangements, I stated, my voice finally emerging with a firmness that surprised even myself. They will not be accompanying me. Robert nodded. Naturally. Should you require anything whatsoever, please do not hesitate to dial 0 from your suite. He gestured to a young bellhop. Please escort Mrs. Thornton to the presidential suite. As the bellhop took possession of my suitcase, David took a tentative step forward. Mom, we need to speak. I looked at him, truly looked at him. I perceived a man of 37 years, not the boy he once was. I noticed the fine lines etched around his eyes, the encroaching silver at his temples, and the subtle stoop of his shoulders, indicative of an unseen burden. Yet above all, I saw a stranger, someone who bore a resemblance to my son, but had ceased to be him a long time ago. Not at this moment, David. But, Mom, I don't comprehend. Why didn't you ever inform us? Later, I replied, and followed the bellhop towards the elevators. The presidential suite was situated on the 15th floor. During the ascent, the bellhop engaged in pleasantries, discussing the amenities, dining hours, and the location of the spa. I offered monosyllabic responses, my mind miles away, lost in contemplation of another era. Once the suite door closed behind me, I finally felt able to exhale. The room was nothing short of spectacular, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic mountain vistas, exquisitely appointed furnishings, a fully equipped kitchen, and even a baby grand piano. In a corner, fresh floral arrangements in crystal vases graced a surface, and a bottle of champagne, as promised by the manager, was chilling on ice. Gourmet chocolates were artfully arranged on the coffee table. I sank onto the plush blue velvet sofa and closed my eyes. The truth, I realized, was considerably more intricate than anyone had ever surmised. 15 years prior, upon the passing of my husband, Raymond Thornton, he bequeathed to me far more than was commonly known. Raymond had been a man of quiet industry, the sort of individual who often went unnoticed in a crowd. We had lived a modest existence, eschewing ostentation and avoiding undue attention. However, Raymond possessed exceptional acumen in financial matters, a profound intelligence. Upon his demise, I discovered we possessed nearly $2 million in various assets, including properties, stocks, and bonds. This very resort, Crestview Lodge, had been one of his more recent investments. He had acquired a 30% stake during its initial construction phase, a calculated gamble on its future success as a premier luxury destination. His foresight proved accurate. Following his death, I was faced with a series of critical decisions. David was 22 at the time, a recent college graduate brimming with ideas on how to assist me in managing the estate's finances. Fiona, whom he had been dating for a mere 6 months, was present for every discussion, every family meeting, readily offering her suggestions. I vividly recall one particular evening. We were seated around the kitchen table in my former residence, poring over documents. David adopted that serious expression he frequently employed when striving to project an aura of maturity. "Mom," he began, "I believe you should entrust me with handling this. It's rather complex. I wouldn't want you to become overly stressed or make any errors." Errors? As if 40 years of marriage and the management of a household had not imparted sufficient knowledge regarding financial matters. Fiona sat beside him, nodding in agreement, her expression one of solicitous concern. "It is a great deal to process, Brenda. David simply wishes to ensure your well-being. Perhaps it would be best if he managed the accounts and investments. You can simply relax and enjoy your fixed income. Fixed income, as if I were an infirm, helpless elderly woman. Nevertheless, I acquiesced. I allowed them to believe they would assume control. I divulged the existence of a few accounts, a handful of documents, merely enough to assuage their perceived anxieties, while retaining possession of the remainder. The most substantial investments, the properties, and the business interests, including this resort, remained solely my purview. Why did I adopt this approach? Initially, I was uncertain. There was a certain way they addressed me, a presumption of my incompetence that stirred a desire within me to safeguard what Raymond and I had painstakingly built. Subsequently, as the months gradually transformed into years, it evolved into something more profound. It became a test. I wished to ascertain their true characters when they believed I possessed nothing of value to offer them beyond my mere presence. I sought to determine if their affection for me stemmed from genuine maternal bonds, or if they merely tolerated me as an obligation. The answer, when it finally emerged, was gradual and undeniably painful. David and Fiona exchanged wedding vows 1 year after Raymond's passing. They did not solicit any financial assistance from me for the wedding. Fiona stated that her parents would meticulously manage all arrangements. I inferred this was their prerogative, their desire to maintain absolute control over every detail. Years later, a distant cousin casually remarked that Fiona had expressed that it was not worth involving Brenda in financial matters, as she was believed to be barely subsisting on her fixed income. My fixed income, which they presumed was my sole financial resource. When the children were born, I endeavored to be a consistent presence. I readily offered my assistance with child care, with any other needs, yearning to be the grandmother I aspired to be. However, there were invariably evasions. Fiona was preoccupied with her established routine. The children were engaged in an excessive number of extracurricular activities. It was deemed an inopportune moment for visitors. They extended invitations for Christmas, but always with that discernible tone. You may attend if your schedule is otherwise unencumbered. It was as if my presence constituted a burdensome imposition they were obliged to tolerate. And the birthdays. Oh heavens, the birthdays. David never failed to acknowledge Fiona's birthdays with exquisite floral arrangements, sophisticated dinners, and expensive gifts. My own 60th birthday, which occurred last year, passed without a single acknowledgement. When I finally initiated contact 3 days after the occasion, David offered, "I am so sorry, Mom. Work entirely slipped my mind." Fiona, I later learned, had hosted her surprise celebration 2 weeks prior, attended by 40 guests, featuring live music and a magnificent 3-tiered cake. I swallowed the pain repeatedly, yet deep within, a part of me meticulously catalogued every slight, every omission, every instance where they deliberately excluded me. And that part had steadily grown, solidifying into something cold and undeniably clear. They were not my family. They represented a failed examination. The melodic chime of the telephone interrupted my reverie. I let it ring. It chimed 3 more times before falling silent. Then my mobile device began to vibrate. David. I ignored the call. Subsequently, it rang again, and then again. Finally, a text message arrived. "Mom, please, we need to talk. We are waiting for you in the lobby restaurant." I gazed at the message for an extended period. Then, With deliberate slowness, I composed a reply. Meet me in the restaurant at 7 o'clock. You and Fiona alone. The children should remain with the hotel sitter. Dinner was scheduled in 2 hours. I indulged in a long, warm shower, allowing the cascading water to alleviate the tension in my shoulders. I selected a dress I had purchased months earlier but had yet to wear. An elegant, deep navy blue garment with a flattering cut that looked even better than I remembered. I styled my hair and applied a subtle touch of makeup. Upon gazing at my reflection, I observed a quality I had not seen in years. A woman who no longer felt compelled to apologize for her existence. I descended to the restaurant precisely at 7 o'clock. The ambiance was exquisite, dimly illuminated by candles adorning each table, accompanied by the gentle clinking of glasses and silverware. I spotted David and Fiona seated at a secluded corner table. David appeared agitated, nervously swirling the wine in his glass. Fiona wore that familiar expression, a veneer of forced composure, her lips tightly pursed, her hands resting on the table, her fingers intertwined with excessive tension. I took my seat opposite them, maintaining a deliberate silence. A waiter promptly materialized, replenishing my water glass and presenting the menu. I ordered without consulting it, my gaze fixed upon my son. The silence stretched, thick and laden with unspoken tension. Finally, David broke the protracted quiet. Mom, why did you never inform us? I took a sip of water before responding. Inform you of what? Precisely? That I own this establishment? That I possess wealth? All this time, we were under the impression that you were barely making ends meet on Dad's fixed income. I never stated such a thing, I replied calmly. You inferred it. Fiona leaned forward, her voice measured but strained. You made us appear utter fools out there in front of all those people. I met her gaze directly, for the first time in 15 years, without averting my eyes. No, I said softly. You revealed yourselves precisely for who you are. Fiona recoiled as if struck. David's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, placing them with care before, discreetly, withdrawing. Neither of them touched their plates. I do not understand, David finally managed, his voice trembling. If you possessed money, if you had all of this, why did you allow us to believe you were impoverished, that I was a burden? I completed his thought, that I required your pity. I picked up my fork and began to cut a piece of salmon with precise, deliberate movements, because I wished to observe something. Observe what? Fiona practically spat the words out. I chewed slowly, savoring the food that they had yet to even taste. I wished to ascertain if you loved me without expecting anything in return. I wanted to know if I held intrinsic value to you beyond what I could provide. David shook his head, his expression one of utter bewilderment. Mom, we have always loved you. Always. Those words would have deeply moved me years ago. Now, they merely sounded hollow. Did you? I inquired softly. Like when you omitted me from the Christmas dinner 3 years ago because there was insufficient space in the vehicle. I verified later. You rented a 7-passenger SUV and there were only 5 of you. David's eyes blinked rapidly. There was a misunderstanding with the rental. Or my 60th birthday last year, I continued, my voice retaining its calm, almost conversational tone. Not a single call, not a text message, yet 2 weeks prior, you expended $5,000 on Fiona's surprise party. I called you afterward, Mom, David protested weakly. 3 days afterward, and only after I called first, I stated, taking a sip of wine. And your excuse was that you were occupied with work. Fiona leaned forward, her eyes alight with barely contained fury. This is preposterous. You are behaving like a resentful child, meticulously keeping score of every minor infraction. Minor infraction? I repeated. I placed my fork upon the plate with a delicate clink. Fiona, in the span of 15 years, you have invited me to your residence on precisely 11 occasions, I stated, having meticulously counted them. And of those 11, 6 were contingent upon my availability to care for the children while you pursued your own engagements. That is not fair, David interjected. We lead demanding lives, Mom. We have responsibilities. I am aware, I nodded. That is precisely why I never voiced any complaints. That is why I consistently agreed when you required my assistance. I observed the children while they were afflicted with the flu, and you had that critical conference. Do you recall, David, I remained awake for 3 consecutive nights? When you returned, you did not even inquire about their well-being. You merely offered a perfunctory thank you and retired for the night. Silence descended once more upon the table. I could perceive David processing, reliving each memory, his face contorted with each recalled event. Or, when your washing machine malfunctioned, I continued, my gaze directed at Fiona. I offered you financial assistance for its repair. You declared that you required no charity from anyone, yet 2 weeks later, you requested David to purchase a new one for you. He subsequently withdrew $3,000 from his emergency savings fund. Fiona pursed her lips. We were unaware that you possess the means. Precisely, I interrupted. You were unaware because you never inquired. You presumed I was impoverished, that I was an inconvenience, that my sole purpose was to be at your disposal when you required my presence and to vanish when you did not. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had employed since his childhood when feeling overwhelmed. Mom, if you had revealed what? My voice escalated for the first time, audible enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. I lowered my tone. If I had disclosed my financial status, you would have treated me differently. Does that render this situation better or worse? David offered no reply. I took another sip of wine, feeling its warmth spread through my throat. When your father passed away, you both returned home every week, remember, assisting me with documents, with banking inquiries, with every conceivable matter. I paused. As soon as you thought things were settled, the moment you believed I had only a modest fixed income and nothing more to offer, the frequency of visits dwindled. They shifted from every 2 weeks to monthly, then only on holidays, and eventually not at all. But we have the children, Fiona protested. We had a life we were building. I understand, I conceded with a nod, and I never expected to be the sole focus of your lives. I only requested not to be entirely disregarded. David inhaled deeply, his eyes welling up. Mom, I had no idea. I didn't realize you felt this way. I avoided his direct gaze. Not once did you acknowledge how your wife referred to me as if I were a burden. Not once did you question why your mother spent every single holiday in solitude. He fell silent. I then turned my attention to Fiona. Last Christmas, I stated, your sister shared photographs of your family gathering on Facebook. I saw all of you, 20 individuals around that enormous table. Your family, David's family, friends. I was a mere 15-minute drive away. I ate a turkey sandwich while watching television. Fiona offered a defensive retort. You told us you had other commitments. That was a fabrication, I confessed, because I understood the invitation was out of obligation, not genuine desire to have me there. I placed my napkin on the table. And the truth, Fiona, I continued, is that I preferred my own company to enduring another meal where I was treated like a piece of furniture. That's unfair, she hissed. I've always been kind to you. Kind? I let out a mirthless chuckle. Fiona, you confided in your mother that I was difficult to appease. I overheard you. I was in the restroom at your home during Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. You two were in the kitchen. You described me as critical, demanding, someone who always found fault. Fiona paled slightly. I've never complained. Not about the food, not about how you parent your children, not about anything. But you needed to portray me as the antagonist to justify your mistreatment. I rose from the table. So no, I wasn't the one who made you appear foolish this afternoon. You accomplished that entirely on your own. Wait, David stood as well. You can't just leave. We need to resolve this. There is nothing to resolve, David, I stated. You've demonstrated who you are for 15 years, and I've finally accepted it. So what? Fiona's voice rose sharply. Are you going to punish us? Disinherit us? Was all of this simply to humiliate us? I looked at her, a blend of pity and weariness in my gaze. No, Fiona, I am not going to punish you. It is unnecessary. You are already living with the repercussions of your actions. I am merely choosing not to continue sharing that burden. Mom, please, David pleaded, catching my arm. His touch was gentle, almost beseeching. Give me a chance to make this right. Just tell me what you need. I met his gaze. Tears glistened in his eyes, and genuine regret was etched on his face. However, I perceived something else as well. A 37-year-old man who had just grasped that his mother possessed wealth, and that he had squandered years of potential financial gain. I do not require you to fix anything, I said softly, withdrawing my arm. I simply wish to be left in peace. I returned to my suite, my heart heavy but my mind clear. 20 minutes later, the room telephone began to ring. I disconnected it. My mobile phone buzzed incessantly with messages. I silenced them all. I poured myself a glass of wine from the minibar and stepped out onto the balcony. The nocturnal vista of the mountains was breathtaking. Distant lights twinkled from homes, stars blazed in a clear sky, and the cool air filled my lungs. For the first time in 15 years, I felt a sense of lightness. The following morning, I descended to the restaurant early. I ordered breakfast and savored fresh coffee and toast with homemade jam, perusing a newspaper an employee graciously provided. It was an almost normal, almost peaceful interlude until David appeared. He looked disheveled, his eyes swollen, his clothing rumpled, as if he had not slept. He sat opposite me without invitation. I didn't sleep at all last night, he confessed, his voice strained. I've been thinking, recalling, and you're right, Mom, about everything. I continued my breakfast. Fiona and I had a significant disagreement. She claims you are overreacting, that you are being manipulative, but He rubbed his hands over his face. I've started remembering things I had overlooked, things I let pass because it was simpler than confronting Fiona. I took a sip of coffee, and I've come to realize I've been a terrible son. His voice cracked. The worst son. Yes, I stated simply. You have been. He seemed taken aback by my directness. But David, I continued, setting down my cup, I did not come here seeking an apology. I did not come here expecting you to finally acknowledge your actions. I came because Fiona extended an invitation, and foolishly, I hoped things might have changed. They can, he interjected quickly. We can change. I can change. Why? I inquired. Because now you know I have financial resources. Because you recognize there might be an inheritance at stake. No, he protested, though doubt flickered in his eyes. Because you are my mother. I have always been your mother, David, I replied. That status did not alter yesterday. What changed was your perception of my potential to provide for you. He remained silent, unable to refute my assertion. I rose from the table, leaving sufficient funds to cover the bill, although I knew it was unnecessary. I am returning home tomorrow. You may stay for the remainder of the week. It is already paid for. Consider it my final maternal gesture. Final? His voice trembled. Mom, you can't be serious. I am entirely serious. I slung my handbag over my shoulder. I do not want your money back, nor your insincere apologies. I simply desire peace, and that peace does not include my continued marginalization within my own family. I departed, leaving him seated, his head in his hands. Yet, I knew this was not the end. With family, it is rarely that simple. I spent the remainder of the morning at the resort spa, indulging in a massage and a facial, and relaxing in the sauna, allowing the heat to dissipate years of pent-up tension. The staff treated me with a deference that would have once made me uncomfortable, but I now accepted it with grace. I was a part owner of this establishment, having wisely invested my capital when others presumed I was capable only of domestic tasks. While in the relaxation room, swathed in a soft robe and sipping herbal tea, a spa employee approached with a hesitant expression. Mrs. Thornton, forgive the intrusion. There is a rather persistent lady at reception inquiring for you. She states she is family. I sighed. Inform her I am unavailable. The employee nodded and retreated. I closed my eyes, attempting to recapture the tranquility I had experienced moments prior. However, 5 minutes later, my cell phone began to ring. It was a local number I did not recognize. Out of sheer curiosity, I answered. Hello? Brenda. It was Fiona, predictably. I am in the lobby. We need to speak immediately. I am occupied. I don't care about your engagements. Come down at once, or I will come up myself. Something in her tone, that familiar air of authority she always wielded over me, ignited a spark within me. If you attempt to come to my suite, I will summon security. A silence followed on the other end. Then, in a more measured, but still strained voice, please, just 5 minutes. I contemplated ending the call, but her voice held a new inflection. It was not the imperious, confident Fiona I knew. There was a hint of desperation. The lounge adjacent to the lobby, 5 minutes, not a moment more. I dressed unhurriedly, deliberately taking my time. If Fiona was determined to demand my presence, she could certainly wait. I descended 15 minutes later, finding her perched rigidly on one of the leather sofas, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Upon spotting me, she stood immediately. Her usual flawless makeup was absent. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair less impeccably styled. She appeared human, vulnerable. I sat opposite her without uttering a word. You are ruining my marriage, she declared abruptly. I raised an eyebrow. I am doing nothing of the sort. Your marriage is self-destructing. David has not slept all night. He has been poring over old photographs, rereading old messages. He has realized, She bit her lip. He has realized things that you manipulated him into, that you constructed a narrative casting me as the problematic mother-in-law to legitimize your cruelty. I maintained a neutral tone. Yes, I imagine that realization must be rather uncomfortable. It wasn't like that, she protested, though without conviction. I simply wanted us to be our own family without external interference. Interference? I repeated the word slowly. Fiona, in 15 years, I have seen you perhaps 30 times. If that constitutes interference, I have no concept of what absence truly means. She wrung her hands. You are right. I know. I have been dreadful to you, but you must comprehend my own mother was controlling, constantly meddling in my life, my marriage. When David and I wed, I vowed I would not permit that to happen. So you assumed I would be the same? Yes, she whispered so softly I could barely hear her. And every time you attempted to approach, I perceived it as an intrusion, as control. So I pushed you away. She paused, and David allowed it because he trusted me, because I convinced him I was acting in our best interest. It was the most candid confession I had heard from her, but it arrived far too late. And now what, Fiona? I asked. Are you here to apologize because David has finally seen the light? Or because you've realized there's wealth you could have been enjoying all these years? Her face contorted. It's not about the money. It's not... I leaned forward. Because just yesterday, you said you had canceled my room reservation. You relegated me to the garbage bin. Did you do that out of familial affection? Tears began to stream down her cheeks. I was angry. God, I don't know. I was irritated because David insisted you come. Because once again, we had to tolerate his mother. And in my mind, you represented everything I didn't want to be. A meddling, needy, demanding mother-in-law. I was never any of those things. I know, she sobbed, openly now. I know. And David is holding it over me. He's re-examining every moment, every excuse I made to avoid inviting you. Last night, he yelled at me. He told me I'm cruel, that I'm manipulative, that I've become my mother. She buried her face in her hands. And he's right. Witnessing Fiona's breakdown should have brought me satisfaction, a sense of vindication, but I felt only weariness. Fiona, I did not come here to dismantle your marriage. I came because, foolishly, I still harbored hope. Hope that perhaps, just perhaps, we could be a family. But what you did yesterday in front of all those people only confirmed what I already knew. I am not welcome in your lives, and I probably never was. I can change, she pleaded desperately. I can be better. Just give me a chance. A chance for what? I inquired. To pretend you appreciate me? To invite me to awkward dinners where we all feign that the last 15 years never happened? I shook my head. No, Fiona, I do not want that. Then what do you want? Her voice was pleading. Tell me what to do, and I will do it. I want you to leave me alone. The words were colder than I intended. I want you and David to live your lives, raise your children, and forget about me, because that's essentially what you've been doing anyway. Now, we will simply formalize it. She stood abruptly. You can't be serious. The children need you. David needs you. The children do not know me, I replied. And David, I paused. David made his choice a long time ago. He prioritized his comfort over my well-being. He chose your version of reality over the truth. And now that the truth is revealed, I cannot simply act as if it holds no significance. Fiona wiped her tears with the back of her hand. You are his mother. Mothers are supposed to forgive. Supposed to. I looked at her, a mixture of disbelief and sadness in my eyes. Fiona, I have spent 15 years forgiving every oversight, every slight, every minor humiliation. Forgiveness is not boundless, and mine expired yesterday when you informed me I deserved to sleep in a garbage bin. She stood there trembling. Then, in a low voice, she asked, "What are we going to tell the children?" "That is not my concern." I stood up. "But if you seek my counsel, tell them the truth. Inform them that their grandmother attempted to be a part of their lives, but their mother obstructed her. And when they finally had the opportunity to be a genuine family, they chose to publicly humiliate her. That will make them hate me." "Possibly," I conceded, "but it is preferable for them to detest the truth than to cherish a falsehood." I began to walk away, but her voice stopped me. "Brenda," I turned halfway, "you are correct about everything, and I am profoundly sorry. I deeply regret how I treated you. I am sorry I wasted 15 years, and I am sorry it is too late to rectify it." Her voice broke again, but for what it is worth, I genuinely regret it. I observed her for a long moment. I saw genuine remorse in her eyes, a woman confronting the consequences of years of cruelty, and for a fleeting instant, I contemplated yielding. But then I remembered. I recalled every solitary Christmas, every forgotten birthday, every venomous remark disguised as a jest. And I remembered yesterday, standing in that lobby, the humiliation burning my skin while my own family reveled in it. "I understand," I said finally. "But sorry does not erase the damage, and it certainly does not mend 15 years of eroded trust." I left her weeping on the leather sofa and ascended to my suite. That afternoon, I contacted the resort's general manager. "Robert, I need to implement some modifications to my stake here." We convened in his office, an elegant space overlooking the gardens. I explained my situation, or at least enough for him to grasp the essence. He was discreet, professional, and I detected comprehension in his eyes. "Mrs. Thornton, are you certain this has been a highly profitable investment for you?" "I am aware, but I require a change. I need to distance myself from anything that connects me to this locale, to this life." I signed the documents he had prepared, divest my share, locate an alternative investor, and utilize the funds to establish a trust for my grandchildren, accessible only upon their reaching the age of 25, with neither David nor Fiona having any claim to it. Robert nodded, taking notes. "And your suite, your privileges, will conclude tomorrow upon my departure." "I comprehend." He paused. "If I may offer a remark, ma'am, I regret the incident in the lobby. The staff is quite distressed by the manner in which you were treated. It is not your fault, nor the staff's. Sometimes family is the most perilous environment." I returned to my suite and began packing. I possessed little. I had never been inclined to accumulate possessions. As I folded my garments, my cell phone rang. It was David. I hesitated, but ultimately answered. "Yes, Mom." His voice sounded broken. "Fiona informed me of your conversation. Please, do not do this. Do not abandon us." "I am not abandoning you. David, you abandoned me years ago. I am merely formally acknowledging a reality that has long existed." "That is not fair. I was an imbecile, I admit it, but I am your son, your only son." "I am aware," I said, closing my suitcase, "and you will always be my son. However, that does not obligate me to tolerate how I am treated. Affection is insufficient when it is accompanied by contempt. Grant me an opportunity to demonstrate that I can change. Please. I sat on the bed, holding the phone to my ear. David, do you realize how many times over those 15 years I waited for you to change? I waited for you to awaken one day and perceive Fiona's actions towards me. I waited for you to defend your mother, to choose to stand by me even if it proved uncomfortable. But you never did. Not once. I was blind. She manipulated me. No, David, do not assign sole blame to her. You observed what you wished to observe. You heard what you wished to hear because it was more convenient to believe I was the problem than to confront the reality that your wife was cruel. A silence followed, then a barely audible voice. What do I do now? Live your life. Be a better parent to your children than you were to me. And perhaps, someday, when you are ready to be genuinely honest with yourself about all of this, we might converse. When will that be? I do not know. Perhaps never. But for the present, I require distance. I need to heal. And I cannot achieve that if I continue to anticipate your transformation. I terminated the call before he could respond. That evening, standing on my suite's balcony for the final time, I gazed out at the moonlit mountains. I experienced a peculiar blend of relief and sorrow. I had waited so long for them to acknowledge me, to value me, and when they finally did, it was solely because they discovered I possessed something they desired. Tomorrow, I would depart. I would leave this resort, this family, this life that had never truly been mine. And for the first time in 15 years, the prospect of solitude did not instill fear. It filled me with a peace I had not known was attainable. The morning of my departure dawned gray, with low clouds obscuring the mountains. There was a fittingness to the weather, as if it mirrored the somber mood of the preceding days. I completed my packing early, leaving the suite immaculate, as if I had never been there. I was in the lobby, completing my checkout, when I saw him. David was seated on one of the sofas near the entrance, appearing as though he had slept there. His attire was the same as the previous day, rumpled and uncared for. Deep circles shadowed his eyes, and his hair was disheveled. As our eyes met, he stood immediately. "Mom, wait." The manager, Robert, who was processing my checkout, regarded me with a questioning expression. I offered a slight nod. He understood and discreetly withdrew. David approached, maintaining a noticeable distance, as if apprehensive I might dissipate if he drew too near. "I know you said you needed space. I understand, but I cannot let you leave like this. I cannot." "No, please, let me speak." He ran his hands over his face. I spent the entire night awake, not merely thinking, but truly remembering. And you are absolutely correct, Mom, about everything. A group of guests passed by us en route to the restaurant. David lowered his voice, though the desperation remained palpable. I recall that Christmas when Fiona stated there wasn't adequate room in the car. I didn't question it. I simply accepted her word because it was easier than confronting her. His eyes brimmed with tears. "And your birthday, God, your 60th birthday." Fiona reminded me that morning. She said, "It's your mother's birthday today." And I replied, "I'll call her later." But I didn't. I went to work. I became engrossed in meetings. And when I returned home, Fiona was planning her surprise party and I simply forgot. I understand, David. No, you do not understand everything. Last night, after you spoke with Fiona, she disclosed everything to me. She revealed things I had intentionally overlooked. How she spoke of you when I was not present. How she ensured family invitations arrived late. How He stopped, swallowing hard. How she actively kept you away from the children because she did not want you to have any influence over them. That revelation struck with unexpected force. I'd suspected it, of course, but hearing it confirmed was different. The children would ask about you, David continued, his voice trembling, especially Jake. He would ask, "When is Grandma coming?" And Fiona always had an excuse. That you were busy, that you were ill, that you had other plans. And his face contorted with pain. I was there. I heard the falsehoods, and I remained silent. Why? I asked, though the answer was already apparent, because it was easier. The tears finally streamed down his cheeks. Because confronting Fiona meant acknowledging that I had married someone capable of such cruelty. It meant admitting that I had failed you. And it was far simpler to accept her narrative, where you were fine, where you didn't need us, where everything was justified. He slumped onto the nearest sofa, covering his face with his hands. I remained standing, my suitcase beside me, observing my son's distress. "There is something else," he mumbled, his voice muffled by his hands. "Something I never told you." I waited. He slowly lowered his hands. His eyes were red, swollen. When Dad passed away, before we began reviewing the documents, Fiona told me something. She said I was the man of the family now, that I had to look after you because you wouldn't manage on your own. Widows your age often become needy, dependent. The air seemed to take my breath away, and I believed her. I attended those meetings with you, anticipating finding a woman lost and incapable. But you, a sad smile touched his lips. You knew precisely what to do. Everything was meticulously arranged. You managed every document, every phone call, every decision with absolute clarity. And that irked her. It irked her that we didn't require your assistance. And you? He paused. A considerable duration. I was mortified. I realized I had underestimated my own mother, believing that without your father, you would collapse. And when you didn't, when you demonstrated your complete capability, I struggled to comprehend it. Therefore, I allowed Fiona to construct a new reality, one where you were managing, but not so well that you no longer needed us, one where we could visit you at our convenience without experiencing guilt. The quiet between us was profound, burdened by years of unvoiced truths. "David," I finally said, my voice softer than anticipated, "why are you revealing all this to me now?" "Because I need you to understand that I am fully aware of my actions. I cannot seek refuge in ignorance or claim Fiona manipulated me. Every time I ignored your call, every time I concocted a reason to avoid visiting, every instance I permitted Fiona to treat you poorly, I made a conscious choice." He stood, moving nearer to me. "And my choices were flawed. I prioritized my ease over your welfare. I valued my marriage above my mother. And now I inquire, now that you're aware of my financial standing, now that you comprehend there's an inheritance involved. It's not about the inheritance." His voice was resolute despite the tears. "Last night, before Fiona disclosed everything, before I processed anything concerning the finances, I looked through old photographs. I discovered one from my university graduation. Your father was present. You were present. And I recalled that day. I remembered the pride evident in your expression, how you embraced me and declared my accomplishment remarkable." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. Subsequently, I examined more recent photographs. Jake's elementary school graduation last year. Fiona was there. Her parents were present. My in-laws, but you were absent. And I realized we hadn't even extended an invitation. We hadn't even given you a thought, David. I allowed my son to grow up without knowing his grandmother. I permitted Fiona to alienate my children from you. His voice grew more strained. And it wasn't due to the money you possessed. It was because maintaining distance from you was easier than confronting the discomfort of inclusion. A portion of me desired to offer solace. The maternal instinct that had guided me for 37 years yearned to embrace him and reassure him that everything would be all right. However, another segment, the part that had endured 15 years of silent suffering, remained unyielding. I value your candor, I stated calmly. I truly do. But David, acknowledging your missteps does not undo them. I comprehend. He nodded vigorously. I do, but it must serve as a starting point. There must be a path to rectification. Rectification for what purpose? For whom? I met his gaze directly. So you can feel better about your decisions, so you can tell yourself you made an effort, so you can participate in your grandchildren's lives, so you can resume being my mother. I never ceased being your mother, David. You stopped being my son. The words emerged more sharply than I intended, but they were the truth. I observed their impact on him, the way his face contorted in distress. Then tell me what I must do, he implored. Tell me how to rectify 15 years of errors. Tell me how to regain your favor. It is not possible. The words were simple, conclusive. There is no mechanism for reversal here, David. There is no series of apologies or gestures that can reclaim the lost time. Then what? You are abandoning me, discarding me as I discarded you? The accusation in his voice surprised me. I am not discarding you. I am liberating both of us. I do not wish for liberation. I desire my mother. Do you truly desire her? I inquired gently. Or is it the concept of a mother you seek, the woman who absolves all, who is available when needed, and who vanishes when not? Because that woman no longer exists. David departed from this world yesterday in that reception area when your wife humiliated me. And you laughed. I didn't laugh because it was amusing. I laughed out of nervousness, because I was unsure of my reaction. You could have defended me. You could have intervened with Fiona before it escalated. You could have taken a multitude of actions, but you chose to laugh. I retrieved my suitcase, and that laughter conveyed everything I needed to know. David desperately attempted to block my egress. Please, Mother, not like this. Do not conclude this matter in this manner. I am not concluding anything. You concluded this years ago. I am merely formally acknowledging it. The children require you. The children have parents. They have grandparents on Fiona's side. They will be well. And me? His voice utterly faltered. I will also be well. I looked at him. This individual who had been my infant, my young boy, my son. I witnessed the genuine anguish in his eyes. I perceived the remorse, but I also observed years of damage that could not be erased by tears. I am uncertain, David, I stated truthfully, but that is no longer my obligation. I moved to pass him, but his voice detained me one final time. Is there anything I can possibly do? Anything at all? I turned halfway. Yes, strive to be better. Not with me. It is far too late for that, but be a better father to your children. Educate them that individuals are not expendable, that family is more than mere words. And when they mature and inquire about their grandmother, recount the truth. Tell them they possessed her, but you let her slip away. This time, As I proceeded toward the exit, he did not impede me. The taxi was awaiting. The driver placed my suitcase in the trunk. Before entering, I cast one final glance backward. David remained in the lobby, motionless, observing my departure. I had envisioned this moment in countless ways. I had anticipated experiencing triumph, vindication, even elation, but I felt only in profound emptiness, not for what I was leaving behind, but for what I had never truly possessed. I entered the taxi. To the airport, please, as we departed from the resort. I did not look back again. There was no rationale for it. That chapter of my existence had reached its conclusion. 6 months later, I awoke in my new abode to the serenade of gulls and the salty tang in the air. The dwelling I had acquired on the Northern California coastline was modest in comparison to my financial capacity, yet it was perfect. 2 chambers, an open-plan kitchen offering an ocean vista, and a small garden where I had cultivated herbs and wildflowers. It was mine, entirely mine. I prepared coffee and stepped onto the veranda, a blanket draped over my shoulders. The dawn painted the heavens in hues of orange and pink, and the waves gently caressed the rocks below. This morning observance had become sacred to me. It was the moment when I simply existed, devoid of expectations, without disappointments, unburdened by the compulsion to embody what others required me to be. The initial months following my departure from the resort had been peculiar. David contacted me 17 times during the first week. I allowed all of them to go to voicemail. I listened to each message, not out of a desire to respond, but because I needed to affirm my resolution. Every call followed the same pattern. Apologies, pleas, assurances of transformation. However, the words held no resonance anymore. The words had never been the core of the issue. Eventually, the frequency of his calls diminished. Once a week, then once every 2 weeks. Now, I occasionally observed his number displayed, but the compulsion to answer had vanished. I had found peace with my decision. The divestment of my ownership in the resort was finalized the preceding month. Robert had kept me apprised throughout the entire process. I implored him not to disclose my new address to anyone, and he honored my request for privacy. The proceeds from the sale, amounting to nearly $3 million, were distributed according to my directives. 2/3 were allocated to a trust for my grandchildren, accessible upon their reaching the age of 25. The remaining 1/3 I contributed to organizations supporting elderly women experiencing domestic abuse. It was ironic, yet fitting. My mobile device vibrated on the table beside my coffee, a text message from an unfamiliar sender. I contemplated disregarding it, but curiosity prevailed. "Brenda, it's Marcia, Fiona's mother. I must speak with you. It's urgent, please." Marcia. I hadn't conversed with her since David and Fiona's wedding, nearly 16 years prior. I deliberated for several minutes before replying. "About what?" The response arrived swiftly. "About my daughter. Regarding what she inflicted upon you. Kindly grant me 5 minutes of your time." I should have declined. I should have blocked the number and continued my tranquil mourning. But something in her message, a desperation I recognized within myself, prompted my reply. "Call me." The telephone rang moments later. "Brenda, thank you for answering." Marcia's voice sounded weary, older than I recalled. "I am aware I have no right to request anything from you after Fiona's actions." "No, you do not," I stated plainly. "I realize, but I need you to comprehend something. I need you to understand that Fiona, she acquired that behavior from me. She paused, and I detected her faltering breath. I was a dreadful mother-in-law, overbearing, critical, perpetually interfering in my son's marital union. And when they finally grew weary of me, when they severed ties with me, I was consumed by bitterness. I remained silent, awaiting her continuation. Fiona witnessed all of that. She observed how my interference devastated my relationship with her brother. And when she wed David, she vowed never to permit her mother-in-law to replicate such actions. She faltered. Except, her voice cracked, except you were never like me. You never interfered. And yet, she treated you as if you had. Why are you confiding this in me, Marcia? Because 2 weeks ago, Fiona visited me. It was our first conversation in months, and she revealed something that shattered my heart. She said, I have become you, Mother. I have done precisely what I swore I would never do. I have become you. I closed my eyes, experiencing a sorrow I had not anticipated. Not for Fiona, but for the recurring pattern, for how distress perpetuates itself across generations. Marcia, I appreciate your call, but this changes nothing. I understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. I am not requesting you to pardon Fiona. I am calling because I need someone to acknowledge that I am remorseful. I sowed the seeds of her behavior, and you bore the consequences. Not just me. I replied softly. David, too, the children as well, and Fiona herself. Yes. A prolonged silence ensued. Is there anything I can do? I challenged myself to respond. Disrupt the pattern with your other grandchildren. If Fiona permits you proximity to them, conduct yourself differently. Be the grandmother I could never be. I heard a sob on the other end of the line. I will. I give you my word. We disconnected shortly thereafter. I sat on my veranda, gazing at the ocean, processing the conversation. Marcia was accurate in one respect. Fiona had learned her conduct, but she had also elected to perpetuate it. And that choice, that was entirely hers. 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail. It bore no return address, but I recognized the calligraphy on the envelope. It was from David. Within it lay a small receptacle and a letter. I perused the letter first, my hands trembling slightly. Mother, I harbor no expectation that you will reply to this. I do not anticipate you will read beyond the initial sentence, but I need you to be aware of several points. Fiona and I are initiating divorce proceedings. Not due to your influence, though. I acknowledge you were the impetus for me to finally perceive the truth. We are divorcing because our marriage was founded on deception and manipulation, and neither of us can continue to exist in such a manner. The children are perplexed. Jake constantly inquires about you. Lily is too young to comprehend, but she senses the absence. I have been relaying information about you to them. Not the fabricated account Fiona constructed, but the authentic narrative. I informed them of how you nurtured me during my childhood, how greatly you sacrificed for your father and me, how you maintained resilience when the world expected you to falter. And I have confessed my failure toward you. The receptacle contains an item belonging to your father. I discovered it among his possessions when I finally compelled myself to sort through the containers in the attic. It is a journal he maintained. Within it, he frequently references you, expressing his profound admiration and stating that you were his most cherished individual in existence. There is a particular entry that is marked. It pertains to the day of his passing. He penned it that morning preceding his cardiac arrest. It states, Should anything befall me, I am confident Brenda will endure. She is the most resolute person I know. However, I trust David will also recognize this. I hope he cares for her in the manner she merits, not in the manner he believes she requires. I read it and wept for 3 consecutive days because Father truly understood you. He perceived you, and I never did. I am not dispatching this to solicit your absolution. I am sending it because you are deserving of knowing that your father cherished you precisely as you were, and that I ultimately learned to perceive what he had always observed. Be content, mother. Embody all that you were unable to be while endeavoring to be a part of our family. With affection and perpetual regret, David. I clutched the letter with trembling hands. Silent tears streamed down my cheeks as I unsealed the receptacle. Inside rested Raymond's journal, its leather cover worn, with bookmarks protruding. I opened it to the page David had indicated. Raymond's familiar, treasured handwriting filled the page. I read his words about me, about our shared life, about his unwavering confidence in my fortitude. And at the conclusion, that poignant statement about David, that aspiration that remained unfulfilled. I closed the journal and held it against my chest, gazing out at the ocean. Raymond had known me, truly seen me, and in a way that had to suffice. I placed the journal on my bedside table, where it would be visible each morning. However, I did not respond to David's letter, not out of anger, but because there was nothing further to articulate. He had navigated his personal journey. He had arrived at his conclusions, and I had found serenity with mine. The months continued to elapse. Winter descended, bringing storms that compelled the ocean to roar. Spring followed, adorning the cliffs with wildflowers. And gradually, I constructed a life that was exclusively my own. I encountered other women in town, widows, divorcees, some who had never married. We formed a collective that convened on Thursdays for sustenance and the exchange of narratives. They were not my biological kin, but they felt more like family than the individuals with whom I shared genetic material. One summer afternoon, I was tending to my garden when my telephone rang. It was a local number unfamiliar to me. "Hello, Mrs. Thornton. This is Jennifer from the Harbor Cafe. You have a visitor inquiring for you. He states he is your grandson." My heart ceased its rhythm. My grandson? Yes, a young boy, approximately 9 or 10 years old. He is accompanied by his father. They are requesting if you would be amenable to meeting them here. Jake and David. A part of me wished to decline. I desired to safeguard the tranquility I had cultivated, but another segment, a smaller yet persistent one, harbored curiosity. Informed them I shall arrive within 20 minutes. I changed into more appropriate attire, brushed my hair, and exhaled deeply. The cafe was a mere 10-minute walk from my residence, yet I selected a more circuitous route, requiring time to compose myself. Upon my arrival, I discerned them immediately. David occupied a table by the window, appearing gaunt and fatigued. Adjacent to him was Jake, undeniably 10 years of age, possessing his father's dark hair and my eyes. Jake perceived me first. He rose instantaneously, but did not approach me. Instead, he awaited, as if uncertain of my reception. I advanced slowly. David also stood, his hands in his pockets, exhibiting an air of awkwardness. "Hello, mother," he said softly. "David?" I nodded. Then I addressed Jake. "Hello, Jake." "Hi, Grandma." His voice was timid, hesitant. We took our seats. A waitress approached, and I ordered coffee for David and myself. hot chocolate for Jake. A prolonged silence ensued. Finally, Jake broke the quiet. Dad says we didn't see you for a long time because he made mistakes. I looked at David. He nodded slightly, encouraging my response. Yes, I stated cautiously. That is accurate. And he says you didn't wish to see us because we caused you pain. That is also accurate. Jake lowered his gaze to his hot chocolate. I am sorry. I regret not having had the opportunity to know you better. A tightness seized my chest. Jake, my dear, none of this was your fault. Not any of it. Dad says you own hotels and that you are exceptionally intelligent. I was a co-owner of a resort. Not any longer. Why not? I glanced at David, then back at Jake. Because I required a new commencement. Jake nodded as if he understood, though he likely did not. He sipped his chocolate in silence. David finally spoke. I did not come here to request anything from you, Mother. I came because Jake deserves to know his grandmother and because he paused, selecting his words with care. Because I wished for you to observe that I am making an effort, attempting to improve, striving to instruct Jake in that which I failed to grasp until it was too late. How did you discover my location, Robert? He confessed. I implored him. I explained it was not for my benefit, but for Jake's. Ultimately, he provided me with the town's designation. The remainder was easily accomplished. It is a small community. I ought to have been incensed with Robert for divulging my whereabouts, but I felt no such emotion. What is it you desire, David? Nothing. His voice was firm. I do not seek your absolution. I do not desire your wealth. I simply wish for Jake to have the prospect of knowing you, should you be amenable. It need not be extensive. Once a month, or every 2 months, whatever you can commit. I observed Jake. The boy regarded me with cautious optimism in his eyes. It was not his transgression. It had never been. Jake, I said softly, would you consider visiting my residence at some juncture? I reside by the ocean. You could visit, and we could stroll along the shoreline. His countenance brightened. Seriously? I looked at David. Once a month, you will bring him and collect him. You will not enter my dwelling. We will not engage in familial discussions. You will simply bring Jake. David nodded, his eyes gleaming. Thank you, Mother. Thank you. Do not do it for your own sake. I stated resolutely. I am doing it for him. And it was true. Jake deserved to know his grandmother. He deserved that connection, and I deserved the opportunity to be a grandmother on my own stipulations. The visits commenced the subsequent month. David brought Jake and departed for a duration of 3 hours. At times, we ambled along the beach, gathering shells. On other occasions, we baked confections in my small kitchen. Gradually, Jake began to confide, discussing school, his companions, his anxieties, and his parents' separation. He did not speak of Fiona, and I did not inquire. It was not within my purview. David adhered to his word, delivering Jake and returning precisely at the stipulated hour. He made no attempt to enter. He sought no profound discourse. Occasionally, I observed him waiting in his vehicle and pondered his thoughts, but it was not my concern. 6 months subsequent to that initial visit, Jake and I were seated on my veranda, partaking in sandwiches, when he remarked, Dad says, you are the most resilient individual he knows. Oh, really? Yes. He states you possessed strength even when no one took notice. He believes that is the true essence of resilience. A lump formed in my throat. Your father is more discerning than he once was. He expresses regret that he was not that way previously. Jake regarded me with earnest eyes. He states he lost you due to his own culpability and that it represents the most significant error of his existence. I was uncertain how to respond to that. Jake continued, but he also asserts that the most beneficial course of action now is to ensure I do not repeat his errors, that I learn to value individuals while they are still present. I gazed toward the ocean, my vision blurring with unshed tears. Your father is correct in that regard. That evening, after David collected Jake, I sat on my veranda with a glass of wine. My telephone rested on the table beside me, and for the first time in nearly a year, I contemplated contacting David, not to grant forgiveness, nor to reconstruct what had been fractured, but to inform him that I observed his efforts, that I perceived his endeavors, even if they could not alter the past. Instead, I dispatched a concise text message. Jake is a commendable child. You are raising him well. The response arrived moments later. Thank you, Mother. That signifies more than you can possibly comprehend. I did not reply. There was no necessity. Months transformed into a year. Jake continued his visits, and gradually we forged our own connection. It was not flawless, but it was authentic. It was candid, and it was on my terms. David never sought more than I was willing to bestow. Lily, his younger daughter, was now 7 years of age, and occasionally she accompanied Jake. She was reserved, more cautious, but also endearingly sweet. I used to share tales with them, stories about their grandfather, Raymond. I guided them through preparing the dishes he cherished. I displayed photographs from David's younger years. Our family dynamic wasn't conventional, yet we were something, and that something sufficed. One crisp autumn afternoon, 2 years after departing the resort, I was in my garden, tucking tulip bulbs into the earth, when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I looked up, anticipating a friendly face from town. It was David, by himself, the children absent. I rose slowly, shedding my gardening gloves. It's not a scheduled visit day. I'm aware, he replied. He stopped a respectful distance away. I needed to convey something to you. I waited, not ushering him nearer. Fiona has remarried. She met someone through therapy. He let out a wry chuckle. Isn't that just rich? But I didn't come to discuss her. I came because, he inhaled deeply, because I've finally grasped something. I've understood that I don't require your absolution to move forward. My task isn't to coax forgiveness from you, but to ensure Jake and Lily are never compelled to seek pardon for similar transgressions. And, I inquired, my tone even, and I came to express my gratitude for allowing Jake and Lily to know you, for bestowing upon them what I squandered, and to tell you, his voice wavered slightly, to tell you that I now comprehend what true strength entails. It means recognizing when to disengage. It means establishing personal limits, even when it causes pain. It means prioritizing your own well-being when no one else will. The ocean breeze, carrying the tang of salt and late-blooming flowers, flowed between us. I lost you a long time ago, he continued, and I spent years refusing to accept it. But now, I do. You are not my mother in the way you once were. You are Jake and Lily's grandmother, and that is more than I have a right to expect. I remained silent. There was nothing to articulate. David nodded as if anticipating my quietude. I won't arrive unannounced again. I give you my word. I simply needed you to know that I finally understand. He turned to depart, but a persistent small impulse within me compelled me to speak. "David," I called. He paused, his back to me. "What you are teaching your children about regard, about boundaries, about not taking people for granted." I hesitated. "Your father would have been immensely proud of that." I observed his shoulders stiffen, then tremble subtly. He gave a single, swift nod and continued walking, not glancing back. I remained in my garden as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. I felt no elation from my words, no sense of vindication, only a tranquil sense of finality. David would never again be the son he once was. That chapter closed in the lobby of that resort. Yet, he was learning to be a more capable father, and his children, my grandchildren, were absorbing lessons he had learned far too late. That evening, I sat on my veranda with Raymond's journal. I had been reading it deliberately, cherishing each entry as a treasured gift. I reached a page near the conclusion, dated only a week before his passing. "Brenda asked me today if I had any regrets," I read. I told her no, but the truth is, I do regret one thing. Not expressing how extraordinary she is more often, not for what she does for me or David, but for who she is. She is strong when the world expects frailty. She is kind when the world offers malice. She is my favorite person, and I hope, when I'm gone, she remembers that. I hope she finds contentment that doesn't hinge on sacrificing herself for others. I closed the journal, silent tears tracing paths down my cheeks. Raymond had truly known me, had seen me completely, and he had wished for precisely what I had finally attained: happiness on my own terms. I gazed out at the ocean, dark under the night sky, but illuminated by the moon. The waves continued their ceaseless rhythm, oblivious to human turmoil, to fractured families, to mended and aching hearts. My phone buzzed. A message from Jake. "Grandma, Dad says I can stay over next month if you want. Do you want to? We can watch the stars from your balcony." I smiled, composing my response. "I'd love that, sweetie. Bring your sleeping bag." This was my existence now. Not the one I had envisioned in my youth. Not the one I had longed for when David was born. Not the one I had endured for 15 years of estrangement and anguish. It was something entirely novel, something founded on firm boundaries and earned respect. Something where I dictated who entered my space and how. Something where my peace was paramount. I had relinquished a family, but I had acquired something far more valuable. I had rediscovered myself. The years of waiting to be acknowledged, to be valued, to be loved for my inherent self rather than my contributions had ended. I no longer anticipated anything from anyone, and paradoxically, that had granted me everything. The ocean murmured softly in the distance. Stars began to emerge, one by one, in the deepening sky. And I, Brenda Thornton, seated on my modest terrace in my small seaside home, was finally at peace. There was no dramatic reunion, no profuse apologies that erased decades of hurt, no fairy tale conclusion where everyone learned their lesson and lived happily ever after. But there was this, a woman who had finally learned that walking away was not desertion. It was self-preservation. It was self-regard. It was love. The most challenging form of love, perhaps, self-love that declares, "I merit more than this." And there were my grandchildren, who would grow up understanding that individuals have boundaries, and that those boundaries are to be honored. They would learn that affection can be extended from a distance. They would see in their grandmother not a casualty, but a woman who prioritized her own tranquility over the comfort of others. And there was me, finally unburdened by the weight of expectations that would never materialize, free from the compulsion to be indispensable, free from the need to apologize for my existence. Freedom, I discovered, doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it appears in quietude, in a house by the sea, on a terrace, under the stars. It arrives when you finally release what was never yours to bear, the burden of ensuring others' happiness at the expense of your own. I took the final sip of my wine and looked toward the future. I didn't know what lay ahead. Perhaps Jake and Lily would continue to visit. Perhaps the relationship with David would remain distant but courteous. Perhaps one day, far in the future, we might achieve something akin to forgiveness, or perhaps not. And that too was acceptable, because I had learned the most crucial lesson of all. I did not require their absolution for my own peace. I did not need their remorse to move forward. I needed absolutely nothing from them. The only necessities were these: the ocean's murmur, the star-strewn sky, and the unwavering conviction that I had made the correct decision. I had chosen myself, and that choice, that simple yet transformative choice, had altered everything. The night deepened, and I lingered a little longer, relishing the stillness, the solitude, which no longer felt like abandonment, but like a sanctuary. Finally, when the ocean's chill became too pronounced, I retreated inside my house. I secured the door behind me, not to exclude something, but to safeguard something within. My peace, my personal space, my life meticulously rebuilt from the ground up. And for the first time in more years than I could recall, I slept without a heaviness on my chest, without unresolved questions, without elusive answers, without aspirations that would inflict pain, only with a profound, silent satisfaction of a woman who had finally navigated her way home, her true home, to herself. Did you find my narrative engaging? And from which city are you listening? Let's connect in the comments section. If you appreciated the story, your support through a super thanks would enable me to continue sharing similar narratives. Thank you sincerely for your generous support. I eagerly await your thoughts on the story. On your screen, you will find 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of additional content. Please consider subscribing. Until our next life story, with affection and respect.